welcome to the session. My name's Penny DeBale and I am the CEO of Holistic 3D. Before we get started, I just thought I'd ask the whole audience, who here would consider themselves to be a programmer? Oh, quite a few. And who would consider themselves to be an artist? And who would consider themselves to be both? Oh, good to see. Okay, so today what I'm talking about will be quite familiar to those of you that actually consider yourself in both camps, which is a holistic approach to game development. So my background, and excuse me because I'm a Mac person, I've got no idea what I'm doing here. Okay, so I've written a number of books on game development, a holistic approach to game development, which are used as textbooks in universities. I also have a lot of courses on Udemy. Who's heard of Udemy? So it's an online education provider, and most of my courses, in fact probably all of them except for one, are focused on Unity and development in Unity. So the kinds of topics that I cover are quite broad, from animation, networking, shaders, C programming, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So I myself would consider myself a full stack developer. So I have a lot of like sort of the creative design skills as well as the programming skills. Now I grew up in computer science and information technology. So I had a very scientific background. I have a major in physics. And so from that, I kind of went into games because I have this sort of hobby and really great interest in art. And I had art as a hobby, and games really brought both of those things together. So I had a real passion for it, and I just really love coding. Anyway, a little bit more about my progression through academia later. So I was a professor of games and multimedia at Bond University until about a year and a bit ago, when I decided that I'd had enough of the academic world. I'd kind of had enough of all the researching stuff and the applying for grants and all the politics that was involved, because who's an academic here? Okay, so the further you go up the academic ladder, the further you get away from what you really started doing academia for, which was the teaching and the students. So, you know, I just thought, no, I actually want to teach and I want to connect with the students. So I started, you know, puddling around on Udemy, found that the courses were quite successful. My courses that I selected to start with one was animation in Unity, and the other one was networking in Unity, because we all know just how great the manual in Unity is for those two topics. So there was a massive gap. I thought, great, let's fill it. And so that sort of started to snowball. So now I've got about 25,000 students on Udemy that take my courses, and I've really just put on my first sort of employee or tutor who helps me out. And it's just going great. I'm connected with students. I've got students who come along and they do the courses because they want to be there and they love it. And most of them are doing it for hobbies, and others just want to upskill for their current jobs. And I get a lot of messages through LinkedIn from people saying that, you know, they've really enjoyed the courses and how much it's helped. And I must say, as an academic, it's quite a refreshing attitude to have from students. Anyway, enough about academia. I could go on about that, but I won't. Okay, a bit about the background of the talk. So in the late 2000s, early 2010s, we saw the rise of what I call like a cottage industry in games. So there were a lot of big studio layoffs, and then there were a lot of like little teams of people who wanted to make games. And the development tools that were coming through, like Unity for example, were matured to the point where they really supported the noobs out there who wanted to do things, as well as the hobbyists and the professionals, and they could produce quite high quality stuff. And at the same time, we had this like app store that Apple produced that gave everybody access to publishing without having to go through a pitching process and begging to studios and that type of thing to get their work out there. So we saw a bloom of all these little studios, you know, with 1, 2, 5 people producing these great games that really were hits, and you can see some of them up there. So who's familiar with Amoebas? No? Amoebas was created by the Binary Mill. Who's heard of the Binary Mill? They make Mini Motor Racer. Anyway, they're on the Gold Coast, which is where I'm from. So Amoebas was something that really launched them, and then they ended up being able to build their studio, and this started with 2 guys. Zombieville USA, created with Unity. That was a husband and wife team. One was the art, one was a programmer. And then you got Fruit Ninja. I'm sure you've all heard of Fruit Ninja. Yep, so another sort of small indie team that it started out as. So what we saw, hopefully my animation is going to play here, is that what you used to have was a great big studio where you have the luxury of all these like individuals with really specialised skills, but then suddenly individuals wanted to create stuff and small teams of people wanted to create stuff, and then studios didn't want to pay lots of people for doing little individual things. They wanted people to be more multi-skilled. So they wanted someone who kind of could combine all of these skills, or a lot of different skills, together to produce what I would call, super indie man, who is, one of these multi-skilled who can do more than one thing. So who would consider themselves like in that category, who's got, one or more skills? And it's quite valuable. In fact, I'm quite interested, who here by themselves has made a game? Yeah, okay, great. So it's quite empowering, isn't it, to be able to know that you've got those skills and that you can do this. So where did my sort of teaching journey start with all of this? Okay, so here we go. Back in 2011, actually I'll go back a year. In 2010, I started working at Bond University. Previous to this, I was in the Netherlands and I was teaching serious games at a university there. I got a job at Bond University, chance to come back to Australia. Now, I'd been teaching for, 15 odd years in the sciences and in IT. I suddenly got a job in humanities, and that was a big shock for me because they do things completely differently. And so I was suddenly challenged with this humanities faculty that wanted to teach their creative sort of art design students to make games, but they weren't teaching them any programming. And I was like, well, how on earth is this going to happen? Of course, I'm a programmer, so I want to teach them programming. So I started using Unity. I introduced Unity into the university when I arrived. They were using Game Maker. I've been using Unity since 2006, so I knew it pretty well. Thought I'd just sort of bring it in. And it was, by now it was on Mac and Windows. And it had a great interface and it looked like a designer type of interface. And so the students kind of really took to it, and you could sort of sneakily put little bits of code here and there. Not too much that it would totally overwhelm them, because I've been in schools where there's like hardcore artists, and no offence to you artists who are just artists, but they're like, I'm an artist, I don't code. And that's, that's the end of it. So it was sort of, stealthily getting a little bit of logic and programming skills in there. Anyway, in 2011, Unity had this mobile games curriculum competition where they gave away 20 Android Google phones and a whole bunch of free licenses at the point when it wasn't free, like the Unity license. So I entered that with the curriculum and I won. So I ended up with all of this hardware, all of these licenses, and I actually didn't have a course because I hadn't proposed a course to a university. And when you propose a new course to a university, it's usually like 1 to 2 years before it sees the light of day. And I had to get this course up and running in 4 weeks. So that was a bit of a challenge in itself. So anyway, I managed to get something and cobble it together and get approval from the dean for this to happen. Now, the course itself had to be quite ad hoc and very agile because we were dealing with sort of unknown quantity of almost first-year students coming in with practically no programming skills, but they weren't, too bad as far as designers. There was also some external interest from the Bravehearts Children's Charity. They wanted an app created. Now, if you're at a Unity university environment, you probably get people from industry all the time coming and say, I want an app created, I want an app created, and then hoping your students can deliver. And it's a really big ask, and I don't think they realise what it takes to do that. So this was kind of a lucky thing that the Bravehearts decided that they wanted this to happen, and this course was almost ready to run. And I figured it would be really nice if we had like 6 teams of 3 to 4 students in the teams to produce some games for Bravehearts, and then just see where that went. So what happened? Okay, so the initial mobile course was approved by the Dean, as I said, but it had to run as a special topic because it couldn't go through the academic board, as I said, which takes all this approval process and like 2 years of toing and froing and all that sort of thing. So we kind of ran it under the radar, which meant a lot of spruiking, had to get out there and, you know, billboard it around and say, come on, do this course, it's going to run next semester. We're going to learn how to develop mobile stuff, which was really cool at the time because it was just sort of, you know, getting a bit of momentum. And I'm like, each team gets their own mobile device. So I really sold it. Ended up with about 20 students enrolled in the course. And then it was like, you know, what am I going to do with all these students? So I thought, you know, let's just dump them in the deep end and, you know, see what comes to the surface. So the teams figured out who was in what. And then I said, okay, in 1 week, Bravehearts is coming to the university and you have to pitch a game design to them. And they did. They delivered. They were really quite motivated, had some really great presentations, had some really awful presentations. But I think overall the Bravehearts people were quite keen to proceed, which we did. So that happened in the 2nd week. The clients came along and they actually chose some of their favourite designs at that time. So the students then had like 12 weeks to get through and learn Unity, get their head around different coding, get their head around different sort of design tools that were available, and then put this game together. Now, I must say that it did take a lot of work on my part as well. So I just didn't let them go. I was always available to them to help solve their problems with them. The group that won, I guess, I spent many, many hours with them teaching them splines because they wanted to draw string on balloons and they wanted to be dynamic. They had no math background. I was trying to remember what a spline was and actually do it parametrically. And anyway, no, that was fun. It was still a great challenge and I had a good time with them. So we did spend a lot of time together. And as I said, it was very agile. So there were no set lectures. Lectures were just created on the fly based on what people needed next for the next week. Okay, and then finally the best game was published in the Apple App Store, and it was publicised by Bravehearts themselves. So they put a lot of work into getting the word out about the app. And there was also a charity event release night where the lead development student went along and a bunch of lecturers also to there. They call it like White Balloon Day. And now I will show you their winning app, hopefully.
As part of this year's White Balloon Day, we've decided to launch our very own iTunes app, Bravebeat. Bravebeat is a fun and interactive game for all ages. Simply string the floating balloons together while remembering to keep the heart beating. All proceeds from the app will go to Bravehearts programs and services to protect Aussie kids. Buy today and make a difference. Bravebeat is available now for iPhones and iPads at the iTunes App Store.
Yeah, so I was really proud of the team that put that up. The students who did that both went on to get really good jobs because they had that on their resume that they had released a game into the App Store. And I think all of the students had a really good experience, and there were many more apps produced. They weren't released, but they went through that whole sort of development process in a very condensed, quick time. So in the next iteration, we partnered with RSPCA. Again, another quite high-profile charity, which was good, because once they heard about this, they thought, oh no, we want an app too, we want to promote, what did they want to promote? They wanted to promote Adopt a Cat. Now I'm a dog person, so, but anyway, that's what they wanted to do, and I'm thinking, okay, cats, internet, okay, this could do really, really well. So anyway, it was another 13 weeks that this took to be developed. A team of 1 student created this, and it went to #1 in the App Store the weekend that it was released, which I will again put down to the fact that it was cats doing something ridiculous. But it was also RSPCA because they got a massive publicity machine behind them. So let's have a look at that one.
If you're having trouble keeping your pet cat indoors, this moggy minder could be for you. The RSPCA has designed an interactive iPad cat app.
It's the ideal playmate for lonely cats.
Basically, the aim of this game is for the cats to protect the cheese.
A cat app for furry pals.
So if we let a mouse go for too long, they'll start circling the cheese and take a nibble out of it.
There's 3 games in all designed to stimulate, entertain, and they can show off.
They have a live system here, and you can see their high score down the bottom. So this is for their human parents to be able to tell how smart they are.
Unlike any other cat apps, it also has an automatic boredom shuffling system, a world-first feature, says student designer Saxon Cameron.
So this is a game that I've designed that you can just put down, and say if you go out to work or go into the shops, it'll repeatedly shuffle through games so the cat will remain interested.
Little Simmy here's just 8 weeks old, but she's obviously the cleverest. It only took her less than a minute to work out if she double taps the app, it'll go to the main menu.
I wasn't expecting a cat to go around trying to figure out what the interface would work like, but it might have been an accident.
Never mind, it automatically defaults back to the game, another ploy to keep felines indoors and not on the hunt.
For us, it's all about keeping indoor cats stimulated and excited because they haven't got that natural environment to go hunting.
Called the Affection Collection, it was part of a university charity project. The download is for free. Lexi Hamilton-Smith, 10 News.
It really works to keep Ellie busy for the last hour.
So that was a really proud moment. My student, I think he was on holidays at the time, he was down here and we were up there and we were just sending texts back, watching it climb up the charts, and it was fantastic. It was just such a great time. So this is actually Saxon here at White Balloon Day because he was involved in the previous one as well. So the lessons learned through those first few iterations was to present to the client early and to get the students really motivated. Don't let their design linger. You just do not have the time when they have to start creating assets and putting them together and learning all the different mechanics and how to code those. Charities make great external clients. I think the nice thing about that is, for me at least, there's no money involved. There's no, you don't have to charge them for it. They're not worried about getting any money they get, they can keep. The university doesn't want a cut of it. The students don't sort of get a cut of it. The students get it on their portfolios, which is more important for them. And charities already have built-in publicity machines if you've got the right charity. And news outlets are keen to be involved as well when it's something that's really clicky and interesting. But you need to work with an established charity. So one semester we worked with a very new charity, and they were a group on the Gold Coast who were promoting getting rid of plastic bags. This was 8 years ago, before we actually have got rid of plastic bags, sort of. And they were complete Luddites. So they didn't even own mobile phones, they didn't know what a game was, and they didn't know about the whole process. So they were really disengaged from the start, which then made the students quite disengaged as well. So if I was to go with any other sort of charities, I would suggest quite prolific ones We've also done apps for PCYC, and we did one for guide dogs as well. And again, they've got the publicity. There were like big release events of the games, and there was sort of a lot of push behind them. Now, for the first time we did this, there was a decision made on what the winning design was really early, like in the second week, which sort of motivated a lot of the groups because they felt like they weren't going to get up. So we sort of ditched that and left everyone to go through the whole process, get feedback from the client all the way, and then pick a winner at the end. And there didn't have to be one winner. It depended how far through the process each team was at the end as to whether it could be published. So everyone could essentially publish. And agility is your friend. So there's no set curriculum. There is a goal at the end. And, you know, you might be teaching physics one week, you might be teaching lighting another week, you might be teaching animation another week, and it all depends and has to depend on the students, their project, and what they sort of need next to continue. Oh, the other thing I should mention is you should have really great tech support. If you're not familiar with working in universities, usually they like to lock down their labs like weeks before you get in the classroom, and in which time there could be a new version of this and a new version of that, and then it's an absolute nightmare, and there'll be firewalls up all over the place. So if you've got a good dedicated lab and some tech people who don't mind bending the rules for you, that also is a really great thing. Okay, so back to why holistic for me. So of course my approach of teaching sort of the art and design together is holistic, but I was always fascinated with Douglas Adams' book about Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And this is like before Netflix. This is way back. So he's one of my favourite writers. So I've always had this word holistic in my head, and I wanted to use it, which is why I did use it in the title of my books. But basically the approach is to teach coding and art in parallel to each other. So if I'm teaching like arrays or matrices, I will make them have boxes that appear in like rows and columns so they can actually see what they're doing and see where values are going and see when they're changing things in those data structures. So it does help to visualise the programming and the algorithmic process for the visual designers who are sort of visual learners. I also like to teach the design and artistic process to coders. Now, a lot of coders are going to think, well, I can't draw and that's not particularly that important. Understanding the process, understanding the aesthetics of it from a scientific point of view, and having learnt about design, you know, there is a formula, there are rules you can follow to make something look good, even if you aren't an artist. And so that's easy for a coder to do, is to think through that logical process to get something that it's going to work and look good. And also teaching them those particular design skills. Okay, so my books, which I am led to believe are for sale today, and I'm happy to sign them if you like. I'm not spruiking my book. Unity have just picked up my book as one that they're going to push with their curriculum, especially in Asia, India and those sorts of regions. And so I'm working with them to update the versions and put more relevant information in, make sure that it's sort of meets their needs, but from my point of view that it meets the university environment as well, who need a lot of the theoretical stuff in there. So what you're going to find in the book, and it is online so you can see the e-version, there's a lot of teaching of coding and art in parallel, again, so that we're visualising that process. We want to teach, or I want to teach designers and artists to code, and I want to teach programmers the design skills. So I'm not teaching programmers how to draw, but I am teaching programmers the fundamentals of good design and graphic design. So user interface, layout, and the animation, you know, the rules of animation, and what looks good and how things work. And it all comes back very much to an experimental approach, which is, again, my scientific background. I try to explain, why colour looks like this because of the science of it, and why do balls bounce? You want it like to lose energy, but it's all like got a scientific factor in it as well. So that there's that, and there's also not to be afraid of what the engine is doing, and actually do experiment and poke things, and just try stuff out. Okay, so as I said, it examines the science behind good design and also in the coding. Okay, so that's me, nice and short and sweet. If you'd like to get in contact with me, my details are on the screen, or you can visit my website.